I just posted a review video for Greenlights, the memoir by Matthew McConaughey, but while I was on it, Bo, what is it with Matthew's book and you making noise in the middle of the intro? I want to know. I want to know what's up with it. However, I thought I would share with you a few of just like my favorite things because it is such a varied read, and sometimes you want to know a little bit more about what you're getting into before you decide to read it, or maybe you've already read it and you just want to know what I liked, and we can talk about it in the comments. Either way, let's get into this thing. I don't know why this passage stuck out so much to me. I guess I just thought it was kind of funny, and it spoke a lot about Matthew's dad and just like that dynamic of their thought process on what makes a man, and what he valued as far as manliness. So apparently Matthew, and I'm saying his first name because I cannot be sure how to say his last name properly, so in order to avoid embarrassing myself every 2 seconds, we're just going on a first name basis. I hope you don't mind, Matthew. I hope you don't mind. He loved to watch The Incredible Hulk when he was a kid. It was like one of his favorite shows, and he used to like pose in the mirror for his big muscles that one day when he grew up he was going to have. And his dad kind of saw him doing this once and asked him what he was doing, and he was saying, I'm going to have, baseball biceps like Lou Ferrigno. And his dad kind of chuffed at this a little bit. And I just love his dad's attitude throughout this entire book. It reminds me of so many people I've known, and in a good way, in like a funny way, like kind of rough and tumble, which I liked a lot. But basically like chuffs at this and says, I'm gonna read it. It's really good. He says, yeah, big biceps make the girls scream and they sure look good, but that old boy on the TV, he's so muscle bound. He can't even reach around to wipe his own butt. I'm not gonna say the other word, but you know what I'm saying. And then he says, the biceps, they're just for show. And then he slowly puts his arms down and then like flexes like this so you can see the tricep action going on. And basically says that these are the working man's muscles. So let me read it to you because I loved it so much. He said, the triceps, son, that's the work muscle. That's the muscle that puts food on the table and the roof over your head. The triceps, they're for dough. And I just loved that. I just loved that so much. I couldn't tell you why. I just thought it was so funny. And it's literally 5 paragraphs out of an otherwise enjoyable book. But for some reason, that little bit has stuck in my head. I can't explain myself. I don't know. I just thought it was funny. And kind of true. No offense, Lou Ferrigno. You know I love you. Another story from just his dad and kind of seeking that approval and that trend. Are you witnessing this? Another aspect of the father-son relationship I enjoyed reading about was the want for Matthew as a son to have the approval of his father, and sort of a transition that happens in adulthood sometimes where you kind of go from being a son to being a son and kind of a friend. Like that's kind of a transition that happens in adulthood. Obviously, it's never going to be like a friend-friend relationship, but there is a switch that happens for some people between mothers and daughters and fathers and sons, where you kind of reach maturity and something happens where you become friendly with someone who was before just like a parental figure only. That's an interesting switch that happens, and I thought it was an interesting thing for Matthew to talk about in this book in general, and an interesting thing just because of who his father was and his kind of gritty, old school, more primitive style of doing this. So Matthew had brothers, and they both had kind of equally silly or crazy stories about how that transition kind of happened. And I liked Matthew's story, and I don't want to do too much detail. I just kind of want to give you a quick thing about it because I thought it was so interesting. But when Matthew was presented with one of these opportunities where it's sort of a test of that transition, of the dad saying, this is me, questioning you as like your authority figure and seeing what you do to see if you're a man yet, basically. And how the first of these tests, Matthew failed miserably, and it's something so small, as most things in life is. It's like he stole a pizza, or he like dined and dashed with a friend, and people found out about it. So the people called other people, and basically he got home from basically stealing a pizza, and his dad confronted him about it. Now, what his dad wanted was for Matthew to be a man and admit that he had done something. It wasn't even that he had really stolen a pizza, to him, it was about you not BSing. So just owning up to what you've done. And Matthew was like terrified to do this at this time in his life. And so he lied. He like flat out lied. And he kind of talks about the disappointment of that moment in himself because he knew it was an opportunity missed. And his father even kind of like escalates the situation and tries to like push him more into it. Like basically told him to punch him in the face. It's like a whole thing. I don't want to get into it because like you should read the story from the guy who wrote it, But the point is that Matthew failed that test and he did not become a man in his father's eyes that day, even though he had every chance to. He just wasn't, I guess he wasn't ready. But I thought that was interesting to not only talk about the moment that did happen, but the moment it didn't. So a moment that transition did happen is when he was out at a bar with his dad and a few of his dad's friends. So they're kind of doing what Southerners do, which is tell tall tales. You hang out, you exaggerate stories, and it's a good time. Everyone loves it. And you have to understand like the kind of culture that Matthew's coming from and the era in which he grew up and that his dad grew up. And I think that's something to get from the book itself. But they're leaving the bar and the bouncer puts his hand on Matthew's dad and says, did you pay your bill? And his dad says, sure did, pal, basically. And something about this guy putting his hand on his dad like that just set Matthew off. And he basically lost it. Okay. And got in a fight. He got in a fight with a bouncer outside of a pool hall bar in a strip mall in Houston, Texas, baby. So this is like another just crazy thing that happens in life. And this was like his in with his dad. It was like him protecting his dad instead of his dad just protecting him, if that makes sense. And so this was the night that he was let in. He was let into his dad's circle. He became a man in his father's eyes. And he said something really interesting about that night. He said, it was the night I became his boy, a man in his eyes, the night we became friends, that it was his night of a rite of passage. And he said, from that night on, I could go to the bar with him, my brother Mike, and all the men I'd been calling Mr. all my life. It was a primitive initiation into my father's regard, but finally, instead of only hearing about the stories from the last night, the next day, I could be a part of them. And I don't know, I just thought that was an interesting dynamic that he has with his father that's kind of littered throughout this book, but also about just that transition that happens. So I'm wondering if that has happened for you with your parents, or if you don't think that you have that relationship where it'll ever be that way, what you think about that dynamic switching as you age. I don't know, I just thought it was a curious topic, so I'd love to chat with you about it if you want to in the comments. Other than that, those are just a few things that stuck out to me. I'm also gonna do one of Matthew's poems that I liked a lot in the description of the video, so you can also check that out. And thank you to Random House for gifting me a review copy and giving me something to ponder over and enjoy on that snow day so many moons ago. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, guys.